It's important to live life with a knowledge of its mystery and of your own mystery. And it gives life a new zest, a new balance, a new harmony to do this. When people find out what it is that's ticking in them, they get straightened out.
You're listening to the Creative Rituals Podcast. Hi, and welcome back to the Creative Rituals Podcast. Today's guest is Alex Wain, a creative digital publishing and communications wunderkind with a run sheet a mile long. He founded the tastemaking platform So Bad So Good, taking it to 1 million followers on his own grit and determination. He's been the digital marketing manager for the Sydney Festival, same for the Ethics Centre, has worked with Universal Music, Rolling Stone, and was even a key part in the absolute epoch of the MySpace era. And that's just scratching the surface. Alex has a very clear vision around what digital presence needs to be effective, and he's really refined his takeaways into a beautiful science. I know that creatives often struggle with the prospect of communicating who they are to the wider world, especially if we have hangups, neurosis, or even straight up fear about presenting ourselves on wider platforms. This episode is called Overcoming the Neurosis of Self-Promotion, and it contains a wide range of handy takeaways you can implement as you navigate across the vast sea of white noise that is the digital landscape. And you'll find out from Alex how you can make a lasting impression. Enjoy. Alex, thanks so much for joining us on the Creative Rituals Podcast today. We've known each other for, it's 23 years, I think, now.
Yeah.
And we've been through so much together, like, in terms of what we've done creatively over the past, it's over 2 decades. There's a lot to chew on, and I'm really looking forward to, sort of exploring some of the avenues we've gone through. And I think some of the things that I've learnt from you over the years has been really invaluable, and why I wanted to bring you on today was to kind of harvest some of those like nuggets that you have in there. And you've, some of the articles that I've seen, that you've been part of, it's been really fascinating to see the process. So today, the focus I want to hone in on, because with the Creative Rituals Podcast, I like to get people who are experts in their field and really hone into one specific thing that they do. And especially with my friends, it can be very tricky to keep it narrowly focused on that. Sure. But I think to keep that focus there will be great for everyone listening. The thing that, has always impressed me about your work is that you're so thorough in your processes in terms of building out your strategies, in terms of building out things from go to woe, but also your tenacity in how you keep on top of things, keep the fire going, keep the coal burning, which I think for a lot of creatives, especially when it comes to marketing themselves, and you're an expert in digital marketing, you've done this forever across so many different, facets, Rolling Stone, MySpace, Cancer Council, you've been across so many different varied, institutions, organizations, and, companies. Just coming back to the very start, like what sort of brought you into digital communications, digital marketing, and that whole world?
That's a very open-ended question.
I know.
I think honestly the start is like I'm actually like quite a frustrated creative. Well, I like to be creative, but I'm not. But so
I think you're very creative.
That's very kind, but I think that my whole digital journey. I think everyone, when I say this, they'll realize how old I am. But like I used to use GeoCities, right? Where I used to make a WYSIWYG. You have like what you see is what you get. You drag around and put little web pages, and it was really cool because it was kind of like you're not I couldn't draw, I couldn't write, but I could move a GIF around and start. These had like spinning pentagrams, and I had little flames. Sign my guest book and all this kind of stuff, and it was my first experience with the web, and I found it like a very interesting and creative space. And it was like no limits to it, and so that was kind of like the first time I felt like oh, I can actually be creative in an environment that is quite interesting to me. And then you fast forward, the whole MySpace era was like, I think a whole generation of developers and coders didn't recognize that they were actually, that's what they were doing. But when you used to hack your MySpace page and customize your HTML and have all your spinning GIFs and music and colors, that was like an extension of that whole GeoCities thing. It was still like experimenting. It was kind of like developing tech in a way that you wanted to see it in a reflection of self.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I started my digital journey. But it wasn't, it was born of frustration of trying to be creative. So I just found creativity in like, GIFs and design and color and fonts and all that kind of stuff. So that was the beginning of it all.
It was like you were like one of the first early adopters of, I guess, the modern form of DIY design. And when we first met, I mean, to give listeners a little bit of a history, we met, I think it was at a festival. I was playing at a festival, and you'd just come out from England, and it was great, like our first meeting, and then we sort of formed this friendship, and then we pretty quickly went into forming a musical act in a way together. And one of the things that you leapt out of the gate was just like designing the website and designing all the marketing protocols and stuff, and I was like, "Wow, this guy's a whiz kid." And what was the original? It was called the Dead Front Project or something like that.
Yeah.
And so then I watched you as both of our careers developed. Like I just watched you sort of very quickly, go into the stratosphere. You started in Rolling Stone. What were you doing in Rolling Stone?
I was doing that. I was just, I started there as like a little coordinator, but like writing articles, but just seeing how the publishing world works.
Sure.
And how it was very like tastemaker driven. It wasn't driven by what people weren't necessarily interested in. It was like, this is the band that I like, and this is the band that I'm going to promote and talk about in this interview. Yeah. And it was quite a naive way of working back in the day, but I really respected it. And obviously it would change a lot now because you got to create what people buy and what people are interested in.
Yeah.
But back then it was very much like, like the Richard Kingsmill of the world. So if he gave his blessing, it was going to go, gangbusters. And Rolling Stone was one of those tastemakers that was, if they said it was quality, then you would listen to it. I mean, it was like Kerrang! Magazine and Metal Hammer Magazine if you liked rock music. And you didn't have access to the web back in the day. So these magazines were your portal to this whole world. And they gave it validation by saying, hey, we recommend it, you should listen to it. And then, of course, next day at school, it was like, oh, everyone's listening to this album. And it was like, well, because you cover Rolling Stone.
Yeah. so what was your role there? Like, what were you doing physically?
Yeah, so I was like the assistant to the marketing director there, and so it was basically like all these sort of strange tasks that she used to set me to do, and she was quite an interesting character. Like,
what year was this, by the way? Like 2003.
Yeah, I think it was somewhere around then. Yeah. I mean, it was definitely early thousands. Yeah. And I remember her name was Sue Osler, and she was actually a writer. She used to write these like love self-help books,
right,
on the side.
Wow.
And I remember one time I was I was basically like her assistant, but I was sitting in her office one day, and she said to me, "Oh, can you just get a ruler out of my desk?" Which I thought was very weird because it's like it's her side, and I go, "Oh, but it's on your side." She goes, "Oh no, my desk is back to front."
What?
Yeah.
Okay. So like the first exposure to eccentric creative,
very eccentric creative, and she wore whatever she wanted, said whatever she wanted, and she was really nice to me. She was a real character.
Yeah.
But yeah, she again like had a very distinct vision for what she wanted to feature in the magazine and who she wanted to work with.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a quite interesting ride. I was only over there for like a short time,
couple of months.
Couple of months. Yeah.
But that was kind of interesting because that sort of set you up. And I remember you were thinking about going back to England, and then I think you got that job, and then you sort of the trajectory changed a bit, and then very quickly you sort of went through a sort of digital agency, and then you went to MySpace, didn't you? I mean, so the early days of MySpace, and I think like some of our younger listeners are going to be interested in this, in like. Talk us through your role at MySpace and what you did. Just give us a brief history of like what you actually did there.
Yeah. So basically, it existed and it was acquired by Rupert Murdoch. And when it was acquired by the Fox Interactive, as it was called at the time, then they were launching it around the world. So they had little hubs everywhere. So I was part of the Australian team that was first launched.
So this is you were part of the team before Rupert Murdoch bought it?
No. Just like literally like a month after he bought it, they started to expand it.
And then they hired you.
And then they hired me.
Okay, right.
So
sure.
There was like 3 employees at the start, and I was the content manager, and my role was basically to try and get content on the site that was localized, because if you went to MySpace at the time, it was all US content. So they wanted to have like Australian artists, Australian music, Australian writers, so that the audience would find something that related to them and was reflective of their culture and the country that they were in. So yeah, I was sort of mandated with that task, and I remember making phone calls to people going, "I'm from MySpace, and give me your album," and they were like, "Who is this person?" Because they were sort of institutionalized into thinking Channel V and Rolling Stone and all these guys at the Blunt magazine were the purveyors of taste and culture, and then you had this online entity coming in and going, "Hey, we've got all these millions of views," and it was very easy eventually to turn all these sort of record labels around, all these studios, because they go where the eyeballs were, and at the time, the eyeballs were getting bigger and bigger every week and every month.
I remember one of the most crazy things you would do is the secret shows that you would do when you'd like get the Cure to do a show for like 50 people.
Yeah,
how the fuck did you convince them to do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was basically MySpace was like a startup, but with this big bank check of Rupert Murdoch, so you had a lot of money behind it.
Sure.
And sometimes we paid them, sometimes we didn't pay them, but predominantly it was the sound check before the show.
Right.
And
so you're going, they're doing this anyway. Why don't we bring in a bunch of kids to watch it, and we can watch it? Yeah, sure.
And in return, we would do banner ads, we would do all these newsletters, we'd feature artists of the month and everything. So they got this promo, and when we would cost it out, we would say, we're going to give you $50,000 worth of promo. Yeah. For literally a 10-minute show.
Sure.
And then all of our users were really excited because I could see The Cure, I could see Fall Out Boy or whoever it was.
It's the chance
to see them. Sure.
It was like a mini competition, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was basically you would follow the band and then you follow the secret show MySpace page, and then everyone who followed that page would get an alert, and it's like, tickets are available at this venue for the first 50 people. And then it was like, everyone would storm the venue trying to find where these tickets are. And then you could go to the show that night.
Wow, that's so crazy.
Yeah, it was really cool.
And you were doing a lot of the direct kind of communication to the user base, and building out a lot of the kind of comms there. And it for a while it was stratospheric.
It was,
and then Facebook just went and just cut it in half. And so what was that like to kind of see this laser focus thing that just cleaved MySpace in half like a laser? And what was going through your mind in terms of, hey, we've got to try and save this sinking ship? Like, what did you do there?
I mean, there wasn't a lot you could do, to be honest. I actually wrote a blog about this, actually.
We'll link it.
We'll link it. And it was basically like to talk about how the fall of MySpace. And there are things that Facebook did that were very clever and very simple on reflection. It required you to use your real name. Yeah. So I could just type in, Bob Brown, I find Bob Brown. But on MySpace, you're called like Bondi Guy 48.
Right. Sure.
So you just couldn't find them.
Yeah.
And I feel like MySpace became very bloated with features. It was like a mile wide and an inch deep. It had like horoscopes and careers and job ads and music and blogs and forums.
You know what that sounds like to me? It sounds a little bit like something else.
It does. Yes, but that's kind of, and then Facebook was very clean. It was very simple. It wasn't going to crash your browser. It didn't have autoplay music. And so they just won through sheer innovation and single-mindedness, and MySpace got so big and somewhat lazy, I think, and lost its way a bit.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was there for like 3 or 4 years, and it was like a really amazing time because it
incredible.
It had the team was growing because they had the influx of the Murdoch money.
Yeah.
All these bands were doing these great shows. All the fans were really engaged, and then you had this like the HTML customization. So it was this sort of like hotbed of corporate creativity, commercial music, all coming together. But its success was not factored into being as big as it was, and then once you get so big, the foundations start to shake.
Yeah,
and the coding was dodgy, and the websites didn't work, and some pages didn't work with others, and it was everyone remembers it being buggy, and Facebook wasn't buggy, and so that was a big win.
And then bang, and it's kind of interesting there because like in the trajectory, and this is, I usually don't go this deep into history with people, but I think it's important to, even with doing a brief history here, for people to know like the fucking the marathon you've run in terms of all different types of things you've been through. So coming out the back end of MySpace, then you'd been doing this for years, and so you had this the muscle memory of proper protocol in terms of digital comms, digital marketing, getting messages in front of people. You started to then develop your own site, which was So Bad So Good.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is remarkable, like what you achieved with that site. You started with a WordPress blog that you bought for what, $50?
It was $38.
$38. And then you grew it over the space of what, 2-3 years? To nearly a million people that were like on your Facebook group.
Yep.
And you would just regularly publish content which you would do maybe what was like 6 articles a day or something like that, and it would be a cool picture, a nice, something interesting, but it would have this sort of edge to it. Everything had an edge to it, and you'd be curating content that you just find because you had so much of an eye for what looked sharp. And you just built that audience organically over years and years, and grew this great publishing business. Can you tell me, like, what was the thought process behind going from MySpace into going, I'm going to back myself now and do my own publishing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because MySpace had a good sense of what people wanted, but it was always within the parameters of what was partnerships or what was being pushed by the record label to a degree.
Yeah.
But yeah, I saw like viral videos. Everyone loves cat videos. I mean, there are certain trends online that you could just see that just linger and have an ephemeral effect out there online.
Yeah.
And so with So Bad So Good, I used to find lots of things that I used to like, and obviously on MySpace it would just disappear from the newsfeed. So I was like, I want to have a place where I could archive it and keep it there as a reference.
Yeah.
And I used to just basically
archiving. We're going to be talking about that.
And I would just basically have all these links. And I thought, why am I sending all of these MySpace links all the time? I could just send them to my site, And and it was called So Bad So Good because it was things that could be bad and things that could be good. So like I would post haircuts from the 80s, and then you could vote, oh, these are so good, oh, these are so bad, and you could go up and down.
A little bit like Reddit.
Yes, a little bit like Reddit. And so I used the content sort of discovery aspect of MySpace and then put it in my own little like $38 WordPress blog. And then one day I woke up and like my server was like, I had these notifications on my server saying like, you're over your limit, you're being charged extra money, and it was like, I think I had like 10,000 people one day, and then the next day it was like 100,000 people.
Oh, shit.
And then it just went going, and then I was like, and I think it hit like 1 million people like in one day.
Wow.
On this, and it was like this post just went viral.
Yeah.
I don't know who shared it because back then you couldn't really see who shared stuff, but someone obviously shared it, and it just went gangbusters. And I put Google ads on the site,
right?
And I made more money in like 2 weeks than I had made in a month.
Wow.
In my job. And so
you're just sort of at that tipping point where you go.
At a tipping point, and I was a bit naive, but I just quit my job, and I was like, I got to just ride this wave. And obviously I didn't get 1 million like the week after, but I built it back up again, and I ran it for like I think like 4 or 5 years, I think.
Yeah.
And we hit about like 60 million people.
Wow.
Like over that year. So it's very consistent. And then we got as you get more eyeballs, you get better advertisers, you get you make more money, and so it was incredible. But a lot of it was just being on top of internet culture 24/7.
And that's the thing, I guess, is that element where you're such a digital native that you live and breathe the internet, and that's such an important part to, I think, the success of So Bad So Good, was you just had this phenomenal tenacity to just continue to do the same thing over and over again. And my first creative ritual is do the same shit over and over again, which is it's a form of tantra. Yeah. So like I'm sort of showing the audiences of creative rituals, and by repetition itself, that doing the same thing over and over again is literally tantra. So the ancient practice, people think tantra is another thing. It sort of is, but it's also much wider, where you're doing a discipline. You're actually like doing it every day, you're showing up every single day. And I think like the success of So Bad So Good, which was huge when it was operating, it was a very, very popular site because people knew that it was clean. You were going to get something great there when you're experienced. So like you had this great Venn diagram of, first of all, you had such a keen eye for like what's good and what resonates with people. You had that tenacity, you showed up every day, but you also understood the apparatus, you understood how the mechanisms of the marketing machine worked and how to kind of get it published. You were doing these partnerships with like Vice and stuff like that. Yeah. So you just built a great business because you knew all those things and you built them all together. What was the turning point where, because the way that Facebook changed its algorithm? Yeah. What happened there?
Well, essentially, two things. They, when they first started it, organic reach was pretty significant, and pay for play, pay to advertise, was not really a key tenet of their. Sure. I mean, it was obviously part of their master plan, but it wasn't at the time. It's like, let's just get people using our platform. Let's just see how they use it. Let's get them posting. Yeah. And I remember there was a time when you used to. It's kind of crazy, but you used to pay for likes.
Right.
And then, 2 years later, then they throttled organic reach. Then you have to pay to be seen. So they actually hit you twice.
Yeah, sure.
I never paid for a single like, and I'm actually very proud of that. But yeah, basically they just throttled your reach. So you do a post, and we had 1 million people following the page, and let's say that would get seen by 30, 40, 50,000 people, and then it was only get seen by 20,000 people. And
so they just squeeze the lemon.
Squeeze the lemon, and then you have to pay to boost it, right? Yeah. And then you would boost the post, or you do some targeting, and then people will go to your website, and then the banner ads that they would see on your website were obviously becoming less worthy, and of course, so the cost of advertising on Facebook versus the cost you're making on the page, you have to get a significant amount of traffic to justify the the spend, basically. And so some articles you would boost you pay $100 to boost a post to get seen by another 20,000 people, and those 20,000 people might click, and then you make $40 on a display ad. So now you're out $60, and you do that 6 times a day. You start losing money very quickly. So, and I think that's part one. And then the second part is a lot of the advertisers, because social media and the targeting was so great. Like you could, if you were Nike and you wanted to sell a pair of men's shoes, right? Yeah. You could go target men who live in Bondi or Paddington, who are this age bracket, who have visited Adidas or who have mentioned the word Adidas in the past 5 days or 5 months or 5 weeks, whatever it is, and show them this ad. Whereas on So That's Good, it was like, I'll just run an ad with a pair of Adidas trainers on it.
Yeah.
And hopefully someone will click on it.
Sure.
And so it was not as cost effective by any means. And so that site itself was very broad, and it had a massive audience, but it didn't have an audience that was necessarily aligned with one particular niche or one particular product or item or lifestyle.
Yep.
And so advertisers started taking the money because they could do better targeting on social networks. And so publishers fell over, and that's been borne out. You see all the publishers have collapsed.
It killed it.
It killed it, yeah.
And I think this is probably the opportunity to have a little bit of a side adjunct from your history. One of the problems that we face as creatives is that Facebook and now Instagram, through the process of enshittification, which
TikTok will be next. By
TikTok's the next one to come. For those who don't know what the process of enshittification is, I'll just give a little bit of an explanation. So essentially, any new tech platform that gains popularity has that influx of new users. So, I mean, could you talk us through the process of enshittification in terms of how you understand it?
Well, basically, they want people to use their networks, and they give you a lot of reach initially.
In the early phases, when they're trying to get people on the platform, they give you that dopamine hit, which is what happened with TikTok. People weren't getting served, but then TikTok came around, and you could get famous on TikTok really quickly. So that's the first process of enshittification. They open the floodgates up.
Yep. You open the floodgates up and you go, I posted these 3 videos and I've got 1 million views on them. This is incredible. So then you start posting more and more and more and more. And all of a sudden you go, I'm getting all this traction and all this engagement. I'm going to stop posting on Instagram, and I'm going to stop using Twitter, and I'm not going to be on Facebook anymore. And I'm going to, I'm not going to use Snapchat. So all of a sudden you suddenly start drilling down. This is my network. And then over time, start decreasing the reach, and you've got to pay a little bit more. I'll pay a little bit more, and a bit more, and a bit more. And then over time, it gets to the point where it's actually just not worth spending the money to get seen anymore. And then there's these latecomers who then go, oh, I've heard about this TikTok thing, and they try and join, and they're so far back in the queue that to grow your follower account or to get that visibility or to get that viral aspect of your content is basically impossible. So, and that
it's one of these things where this is. I guess one of the flaws of late stage capitalism, in that one of the dilemmas that we have in the information age is that information is always viewed through commerciality. So it's not viewed in terms of utility, in terms of a social aspect or its cultural, anthropological element. And in the early phases of companies, when they're providing these services that give information, essentially these are information companies, and they start out by giving people an opportunity to create culture. So much of culture has been created through social media, but what happens is because a business needs to sustain itself, it can't be operating with that first stage for the rest of its life because it won't grow. So it's almost like tech companies are like these operating cancers of culture because I find this with every creative I talk to that is an artist, a musician, a video artist, a visual artist. No one posts anything artistically now to Facebook.
No, well,
doesn't get served. I know every type of art thing that I do, if I put it onto Facebook, it's not going to get served.
Do you mean Meta? Like the whole
Meta? Well, I mean, Instagram is turning into that. Like I'm finding, like when I first started out as the Vidiot, and I was doing visual pieces, I caught the last whiff of helium. I fucking caught the last bit of it, where I would put up a piece and it would get featured on the page, and then bang, it was like I grew my follower count by thousands within the space of a couple of weeks. I was like, holy shit.
And it's really addictive.
You go, oh my God. Like people are registering with my original work, and like, so I was like, wow, Instagram, let's keep it going. And then you could feel the algorithm
the engagement drops.
It just goes zoop.
Yep.
And everyone that I was speaking to went, yeah, dude, like
I never see your stuff anymore.
Yeah. So now you've got to pay Instagram money to actually get it out.
Yeah. But I mean, and I'm not defending them because I think I agree with you.
I mean,
I agree with 100%.
For argument's sake, let's defend them.
But I think it's very difficult because you have so many people on the site. You can't possibly show it. You can't show one.
Show all of it.
You can't. Yeah. So if 10 of your friends join the site, I can't, and you're on there for one day. You're gonna. I'm just making this up, right? But this is one day. You see one person's content. So the other 9 people don't get seen.
Yeah.
So, or
it is a volume issue.
Or do you decrease everybody so that everyone gets like 30 seconds of your attention in that day? Yeah. And that's when your reach gets crushed. Yeah. So as more people use it, actually, it becomes
harder to get visibility.
But they would say that we can't rank everything from everyone you follow because there's not enough hours in the day, and you don't use it enough to show you everything that everyone follows.
It's interesting though, because I mean, this is just anecdotally, but I've probably spoken to about 20 artists that have experienced the same thing. Like they were getting reach, and then I guess there was a point. It was like mid 2022 with Instagram, where they were trying to compete with TikTok.
Yes, and then they shifted to Reels,
right? Yeah. So it's really interesting because like the decisions of companies dictate culture now in a way. So their 100%. Commercial imperatives now dictate how we create culture.
Yeah.
So I think the challenge as I guess creatives and creators of culture is to build out protocols that we can I guess combat those business decisions. And I think like one of the skills that you have is the ability to bring everything together and to create a refinement in an approach to the marketing of your stuff. So one of the problems that a lot of creatives face, and I have this just with discussions, is that most creatives, in my anecdotal view and in my opinion, struggle with some form of neural divergence. This is the thing I'm starting to. Now, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a registered psychologist or anything like that, but anecdotally and from just a perspective piece, most creatives have some kind of thing like this, and a lot of those folks struggle with promoting themselves. It is one of the really hard things that that people have to do now. So I guess like one of the things that I've always really respected about you is your ability to create a robust strategy around your own material. So your brand Phantom Notebooks is an example of this. Now, you're in the world, you're in the social media space where you have to, you're up against all this sort of stuff, and you've had to create your own protocol. So I guess like in terms of, let's just say for an example, there's an artist on Instagram that doesn't perform well anymore, and they want to sell some of their works, but they're just not good at kind of building out their social media. What are the sort of key things that you encourage people to do, that you've done yourself, that that you think are must-dos with the development of promoting yourself or being active in the digital space? Yeah, I know it's a big question.
It's a very big question.
We can break it down.
In my experience, one of the keys is consistency.
Sure.
I mean, I think sometimes you see, and you're obviously at the mercy of algorithms, but sometimes you see a post, like I follow a lot of tattoo artists, right? And sometimes you see a great tattoo come up in your feed, oh great, and then you go to the profile, and the last post was from 8 months ago, and you think, are they still tattooing?
Yeah.
Did they just stop? Or like, don't they just use it anymore? And like, are they still active? And so I think that does a disservice to you as an individual. It's appropriate that you constantly tell people that you're actually open for business and you are active, whether you're creating. I think a large part obviously is it's shifted a lot, but like, talk about the early days of social media where it was just like, it was a bit of a wild west and everyone was uploading photographs from the night before and checking in, and everyone had open profiles, right? And then it went for this lockdown phase and all the influencers came along, and now it's this sort of weird era of like, it's very fragmented, but I still feel throughout the whole process and the rise of social and all the different algorithms and all the different money and everything's changed, you still can't beat authenticity.
Sure.
And I think people, when you buy a bottle of wine, for example, you're not buying the wine because you you obviously like it, but a large part of it is where it came from, and what vintages it is, and what the temperature was like that year, and while it was raining or it was wet. And when you open that bottle, it's a story. Yeah, and that gives you that investment in it that it goes beyond just the material product. And I think when you look at artwork online, you go, "Oh, that's a cool picture," but it's so much cooler if you know why it was created and who created it. And I spent 50 hours doing this pencil drawing, and you go, "This is incredible. This pencil drawing looks like a photograph." Yeah. And they go, "And I'm just asking for $500," and you go, $500 for 50 hours work is actually very cheap in terms of that. But if you just post a picture and go $500, people are like,
it's true.
People are like, why am I buying? Why am I buying it? I mean, I might buy it because you like it, but you're much more. You have a bigger proclivity to do it if you believe in the story and the person, the individual, and the authenticity behind it.
Interesting.
And I think a lot of artists forget that because sometimes you're very protective of your artwork, and sometimes you think I'm not good enough, or I don't want to show people my creative process. Yeah. But people kind of expect that now because they feel more attached to it. So that rise of like niche micro influencers, and I'm not saying people who have millions of followers. I'm saying people who do. Let's just say you paint pots that are like neon pink. That's your thing. You just do neon pots, right? Yeah. If you why did you pick that color pink? Why did you make it that way? Let's just see you making it hand by hand. Let's see you changing the ink. Let's see all that kind of stuff. And that you take people on the journey. Yeah. And I think people really relate to that and they enjoy it a lot more. And they feel like when someone sees that pot, oh, that's a cool pot. Oh, it's this guy on Instagram. He does it like in his house. He lives in this rooftop in Brooklyn somewhere, and he takes him 5 days to paint it, and he gets the paints from this other place. And so you're buying the story.
You're buying the story.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely fascinating because I think it's one of these things where I'm starting to build out a protocol myself when I'm educating people on creativity. So, or not educating. I firmly believe you can't teach creativity. You can only teach process, and it's up to the individual if they're creative or not. I think you're sort of born with a creativity. The process will. My view is that process will eventually bring out something creative, because if you do the process enough, something will come. Yeah, and it depends on whether the cart drags a horse or not, right? But the thing that I'm trying to encourage creatives in the disciplines I teach in any way, I say to them, you make one of two choices. You create for yourself or you create for the world. Yeah. And if you choose to create for the world and then you want to market it, right? You got to think like a business.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to have protocols like a business would. And you have to treat your work like a product. Yeah. And I know that's like people will hear that and go, oh, that's just against the thing of creativity. It's like, okay, well, don't get disappointed when no one engages with your shit
buys your work.
or buys your work. Like, and I found that myself just when I sort of had my explosion as an artist, when I, took the acid and and became that thing where I was like, oh, people aren't engaged. And it's like, well, hang on, you have to build out a protocol like a business would. Yeah. So you're essentially advertising your work, and going to the root of the word advertising in terms of etymology, what the word advert means. It means to draw attention to. So, like you say here, for creatives that are looking to build out a protocol, the consistency is the key there, and then also the story. I think that is really, really important because one of the dilemmas that artists say to me is they go, Well, back in the day, like when you were an artist, you could spend 3 months on a painting and then, you didn't have to do a painting every day. Like Instagram expects us to do different work every day.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, you don't need to. If you can create that story, like, so viewing the promotion of your work, so you create one piece, but you talk about that for 3 weeks.
Yeah, you do a time lapse.
You do a time lapse, so
you're sketching in a
but
head
you
or an
can
eye.
drip out pieces of content that can kind of like feed the beast, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like tightening up your ship as well, like I know that you're big on things like links are broken here, and that sort of stuff. Like, how important is it to have, if you're going to do creative work and you're going to push it out into the work, because you might just want recognition.
Yeah.
That might be the currency that you're looking for, and I think it's absolutely okay. Creatives need validation, right? We need it, and we go to social media because it gives us that validation. It gives us that dopamine hit. For love or money, whether that's a bad thing or a good thing, we're not going to talk about that today. We can philosophize about that later. But right now, we can say that the raw form of it is that creatives first need validation. If they want to be in the world, if they just want to do it for themselves, that's great. They can keep it to themselves, and it's just a process that they can do. My auntie Sue, she's a great artist. She doesn't have an Instagram. She just does her own art and just puts it up on her wall. It looks great. And then she goes, I don't want to be on Instagram.
Do it for yourself.
And she does it for herself. She gets so much therapeutic benefit from that, and she's developed her skill. So Auntie Sue is like, she's done it really well, you know. But then if we want to go, okay, I want to go into the big bad world, right? So this is where we're talking about building out protocols so that it's almost like we're building a ship, we're building a vessel, and those vessels have to be watertight.
Yeah.
So in terms of checking all your shit, making sure that everything works. I mean, how important is that to you? I mean, what do you see when people do it wrong, and what advice do you give to people in terms of, developing a robust platform for themselves?
I think, a really simple one that you can do is, create your own email list. I know it sounds very basic, but it's like it's an audience that you own, and it's not an audience that you rent from Zuckerberg or Musk. It's your own crowd. And you see a lot of people who run the Instagram channels or who run TikTok, and they don't have a website.
Yep.
DM me for prices. I don't want to DM you for prices. I might even get seen. I get stuck in your inbox, and I get filtered out as spam, or you know what I mean? It's like, what is a clean and simple way to message you? Do you have an email address? Do you have a website? Can I contact you? Can I share your link? Because I think a lot of times people don't understand that, there are different audiences on different networks. Yeah. And if you are just solely on one network, you have to be able to reach different people on different platforms in different ways, and control the messaging. And the way you control the messaging is by having one central resource. Yeah. So that's where like that great site, what's it called? Linktree. Linktree, right? Comes in. It has everything there. It's one source. Yep. All your links, and you just post that across all your different social channels. So many don't have that, and it's like such a basic, easy thing to do. To have where to buy my stuff, how to contact me, what shows I have coming up, and a bio. And that's it. Because I'm just looking at your feed, I'm saying, oh, it's great artwork, but who is this person? Because you can't put all that information necessarily in that particular format. But you have to have a place where it's all organized, and it's clean, and it's simple, and it's easy to use. And sometimes you go to people's web pages and they're broken. And you think, if you can't even bother to maintain your own domain name, do I want to give you $500 via PayPal?
This kid got in touch with me saying, he was from India. It looked like, legit. And he was like, oh yeah, I want to do some stuff with you, or like, that's right. He wanted mentorship. Right. He was looking for like mentorship. He was doing it was like a digital agency sort of thing. He goes, oh, Jess, I want to get your advice on things and stuff. And I just looked at his page, and it was like 5 broken images. Yeah. And I said, dude, right off the rip, fix those images. Because it's like, that's the first thing I see when I go to your thing. Yeah. I mean, like, how often do you encourage people to till the soil, like, of their own stuff? And like, I think there's that other thing too, where you've got to view it like someone else. You do, yeah. And it does a disservice to yourself. You're not selling yourself if you have links that don't work, or your website doesn't work, or you haven't updated for 6 weeks, or like, you have to. And I know it's very challenging, and I know it's very draining for people to have to constantly feed these bits. I've got to update all these different networks and stuff. But it's basically like nothing worse than going to a shop. It says open hours.
And you go, oh, I'm here, and it says it's open, but it's closed. And that's very frustrating, and it dissuades you from going back there again. And if I go to a website that's broken, or I want to buy something from a creative, and the site doesn't load, or the thing's sold out, or I just feel frustrated by it, Or you're competing with so many other creatives that if I see something I like, it says it's sold out, but we're going to be releasing some more. Join our mailing list. And you go, that's cool. You join it, and you forget about it, right? And then you're looking at something else, and then you're down the rabbit hole of the algorithms, right? And you forget about that artist. And then 6 months later, you get an email. Oh, my new series is out. You go, oh, I remember this person. I really liked them. And it's that personalized conversation directly into your inbox, not having to fight the algorithms. I just click, I go through your website, I look at your great assets, I buy. That's it. Not competing with anybody else, not competing with having to go on Linktree or TikTok or Facebook and Instagram. It's just you, me, direct correlation. But so many don't do it because they just rely on these networks that constantly service, I want to be featured on the homepage, I want to get featured in people's reels, I want to be tagged, I want to be shared. But it's like that is very transitory. You don't own it. And as soon as it switches, your business is gone. Yeah. So I would always encourage have an email list because people will sign up and forget. And they will, you might do some great artwork and never get ranked in the algorithm ever again, but you've still got me on your list, who is a potential buyer. So I think it's very simple, but you'd be amazed how many people don't do it.
There's the amount of people I know that say, "Oh, I've got to do my website. I've got to update my website."
Yeah, it doesn't have to be amazing.
It's like they keep on telling me, like, use the energy that you're doing to tell me that you've got to update. We'll fucking just do it, right?
Yeah, or use energy to update your website and not post that reel.
Yeah,
for one day.
Yeah, sacrifice a social post. You know, and it's a real challenge because there is that thing where people there's this subconscious resistance that happens with it because this is speaking very generally, but a lot of creatives just they hate it. Right?
Yeah, I understand.
And I suffer from it myself. And I think it's that thing where it's like you said there, like if you go to a shop and it's closed, and if you feel like you're getting dudded by that person on the first contact point,
it's not a great experience.
You're just gonna not go back there. So I think that's a really great point there. Just from an anthropological perspective too, is that the format of tech platforms is now like dictating culture. Like, I mean, in terms of like TikTok, for example. What were you saying before?
so I think like originally social was supposed to reflect culture, but now it's like culture is geared towards the algorithms and the formats that are designed by these companies. So for example, TikTok, if it's a 15-second, you get 15 seconds to post your video, so then you do a 15-second dance. So you're doing your whole thing, 13, then 14, 15, and stop. Yeah. Right? Now that dance might be actually amazing if it was 45 seconds, but then that's, that's not part of the format and the setup. And so you shift your behavior to cater to the actual platform.
Well, there's also that thing too where you go, because, and it's quite strange to see it unfold as a thing, and we're going into a little bit of the more mossy end of culture and technology, where people are moving into being creative because of the distribution platform.
Yeah.
So they want to be famous. So they become creative to be famous
within the framework
of that algorithm or that technology platform.
Like Andy Warhol said, 15 minutes of fame, but now it's 15 seconds of fame.
15 seconds of fame. So you get this thing where there is this creative philosophy element that we can unpack here, where you go, is that culture valuable? I mean, what in terms of like the apparatus of culture, technology merging with culture, where a dance that is not viewed in a TikTok framework, that is just performed in front of an audience, is vastly different to the type of dance that's performed for the capture device. Right? But it's like, but then you've got things like Gangnam Style. That was designed for YouTube. That dude made that video for YouTube, what are some of the examples that you see? Like, I mean, what are some of the things that you think, make you go, oh?
Well, I saw one recently. I can't remember where it was, but it was somewhere in China. And it was this long boulevard. and it was literally like 50, 60 people, all different, right, but all lined up in a row with the Halo ring on their phones doing TikTok or Instagram.
Whoa.
And they were all on this one street. And the reason they were in that one street was because they were in a suburb that was a very high-end, wealthy suburb.
Right.
And the algorithm favored content that was posted from that cell phone tower and using that IP address. And so they all went there to rank higher in the newsfeed.
Holy fucking shit, dude.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So if you film a video in, up in the mountain somewhere, you might get, versus Bondi Beach, the algorithm will naturally surface Bondi Beach more because more people are interested in it.
So they figured out that, and then there's like literally a content farm now.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
insane.
Yeah.
I remember that, when Pokemon Go came out, you get those dudes with the bikes that have like 40 phones. It's like, it's so, I mean...
And that is really scary because that is technology shaping culture and not the other way around. Like, it's forcing you to line up in a row because it's decided that people in that suburb create content that other people want to see because it's a wealthier suburb. Therefore, if you film your content in that suburb, you'll also juice the algorithm as well. And so, that's not reflective of your culture or where you're from or your area or your community, but you go there because, that's where the eyeballs are, and that's what's being dictated to by these overlords.
I remember when I was working for World Nomads, and we would do travel documentaries. Mm-hmm. I remember going to Borobudur, which is in the in Yogyakarta in Indonesia. There's this famous temple that got claimed. It's Russian Instagrammers just were like locusts. Okay, it's so surreal. This thing. It's like you go, what is the point of it? I think that there is this desperate need for validation. I think it folds into this idea that if you're monetizing it, then great. If you're doing good volume of money off it, then awesome. But if you're like just trying to push it up a hill, and you're just going, I saw it with travel influencers when I was giving out production budgets. And there was this massive glut in sort of the early 2010s where everyone wanted to be a travel content creator, and probably like 0.5% of them that started doing it like 09 made some money off it. And then you had all these other people in this sort of massive bell curve. And it's like you see people desperately trying to kind of create this content because they think that it's going to liberate them. They think that like by being famous it's going to give them this thing. And I think like one of the problems with creativity is that it's it has a level of enamorment to it. Oh, I'm going to be a musician because I want to, tell my true soul, and it never really quite pans out for people. And I think like one of the problems with technology is it sort of sells you this dream of, if I do line up with the 10 other people in, this province in China, then I'm the one that's going to break through, But it's like the gold rush.
It is like the gold rush. Yeah, and also I think it's made culture very formulaic, right? Because everyone, essentially, there's only so many landmarks in the world and so many beautiful sites in the world. So everyone goes to the Opera House, everyone goes to the Leaning Tower of Pisa, everyone goes to the Eiffel Tower, and it's just the same content with some attractive person. Come with me as I go to the Eiffel Tower. Whoa, whoa.
I know it turns into this thing where it's just like it's just
and then
paint by numbers.
Yeah, it's paint by numbers.
I think that it would be so depressing to do that shit
all
all
the
the
time.
time.
I think
you
it
just hate doing it after a
but
while.
like I said before, like that goes back to that authenticity. Like it's not authentic to do something that everyone else has done. In a very short format. It's much better to do it something that go and film something that is really off the beaten track, that is actually genuinely interesting.
And that's the challenge. That's the sort of chicken or the egg thing with creativity. Is that you go, the whole point of creation, the novelness of something is like you're and I think that's where it's like the differential between an artist and a creator, a content creator. It's the difference between art and content.
I think
when
they're
it's
very different.
Content, it's servicing the business end of things.
Yes, that's a very big distinction to make.
In terms of like the idea of feeding the beast in terms of if we are going to be, creating material for algorithms, and we have to, play the dance with the devil in a bit, to kind of like make it work for us. One of the more, I guess, hidden concerns with this sort of stuff is the changing nature of how businesses can change over time, and like the importance of staying on top of how I guess social media technology platforms are changing. How do you do that? I mean, is there anything that you do to, apart from just general interest, how do you keep on top of the changing nature of tech?
I think, and it's just, again, it's like a good hygiene thing to do. Any network that you hear that's been talked about, just create an account.
Yep.
Just get the username you want, whether that's the Twitter alternative Blue Sky, or it's Mastodon, or it's Discord, or whatever it is. Just get on there and start using it, because you might unearth a whole new audience that didn't actually think it ever existed on another network, So that level of like being open to ideas, and most of those formats on social are very similar now. Like Reels was copying Snapchat,
Snapchat,
and then TikTok's copying the algorithm of it. So like they're all kind of like interconnected, but subtly they are different. Like if anyone's been on Twitter recently, it's very different to how it was 12 months ago, right?
Of course.
Right?
With, old mate at the helm.
Oh, well, you're verified or you're not verified. Oh, you're verified if you pay, But I remember there was this rabbit hole. Everyone was like, oh, do you know what? You have to have a Google Plus account. Google Plus is where it's at. It's going to revolutionize search, and then they just grandfathered it and killed it and dead, and that was it, So many. Vine, which was like 5 seconds of people's attention spans. It was like, and I read a really interesting fact about Vine. It was like 90% of the people didn't create on it, but 10% did. So everyone was just like consuming.
Everyone was there watching.
Everyone was there watching, and it was too difficult. And I think the curve to get involved was too high. The threshold was too high. But when you make it 15 seconds, it's a lot easier. And that's so even algorithms are even social networks themselves are working out the best
optimization for like how things get served.
How things get served. And Periscope was another one that Twitter had. It was like, it's like live video where you can just talk to randoms. And then chat roulette was another one.
I mean, that's the challenge here, is that, who has the time to spend on this? But I guess it's like if you do want to move into platforming what you create and getting it in front of the world, you got to play ball. And I think it's like making that choice where you go like, okay, if I'm an artist, if I'm a creative or whatever, I just have to create a portion in my brain where I go, right, that is the bit that I need to do if I want to do this.
Like a time-lapse video. It's very simple. Right?
You've got to enact the discipline. And I think like one of the challenges, even in podcasting, I've got the art of podcasting school through Creative Rituals. One of the things that I'm teaching people is the absolute pain in the ass of doing podcasts. You've got to learn the editing. You've got to do all the different bits and pieces. But then when it comes to pushing your podcast out into the world,
it's a whole other job.
You've got to be a video editor. You've got to know Premiere.
Yeah.
So one of the challenges there is that you've got this this massive need that you need to, and it can be fatiguing to think about that. So I think like finding the right tools as well, like getting to the point where you're assessing the market and viewing what you're doing like a marketer, and creating that brain distinction where you go, okay, what's the output that I need to do, and if it's too much for you, then you're probably not cut out for it. You know? And I think like creativity is one of those things where if we view it as I put my stuff out there and no one looks at it and that means I'm bad, we got to stop thinking like that, because the whole point of getting your stuff into the social realms is that you're almost like a business.
I would say art isn't bad. I would say you're bad at marketing.
You're bad at marketing yourself.
Yeah.
I think we're touching on something that's really interesting here, and I think in terms of how creatives approach their integration into the world, there's sort of this distinction between like a digital creator and an artist.
Yeah,
like,
100%.
What do you think that distinction is? Like, how can we, separate those worlds? Do we need to separate those worlds? What's the importance there?
In terms of content, you don't necessarily need to separate it because the audience will gravitate to one or the other. But for reference, for being able to create a distinction in your own mind, they're very, very separate. So, like for me, a digital creator is someone who will go to a bakery and they'll photograph and talk about, come with me as I try these delicious scones. They are yummy. They got mango and strawberry. And they zoom out and they're eating these scones and they look really delicious. And you go, oh, I really want to go there. And they tag the location and you think, oh, this is fantastic. Maybe they've been paid, maybe they have not been paid, right? But they're creating content for that brand and that story. And you think, this is quite interesting. But it's not really artistic. They would argue that it is in the sense that it's been shot and edited in such a way.
Yeah.
But that's very different to somebody who's sitting there doing a line pencil drawing for 45 hours of their cat.
Yeah.
So that's an artist playing in the digital realm, but a digital creator, I think, is someone who purposely goes out to create for the format, the 15 seconds, the 16 by 9, like that kind of vibe.
And I think it's that thing where it's like, you know, the yin yang, how you got the yin yang, there's like the black and the white, and there's a little bit of the black and there's a little bit of the white, right? And I think if an artist wants to go into the world of digital creator, which they really have to arrive at a point where they go, okay, if I want to be seen, and if I'm humble enough to know that I'm okay with saying, I want to be seen, I want validation, gotta play ball. You gotta play ball. If you're going to step into the world, you are a digital creator.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to be entirely a digital creator, but there's something where that little white point of the yin yang, that you need to get that robust. You need to build that, you need to build a protocol so that works for you, not against you. Yeah. And I think one of the things that creatives really struggle with is this element where it's anxiety inducing, to go, oh, I have to, prostitute myself and I've got to be this social media person and I'm a creative, and it's like blah, 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 right? So what happens is the brain gets filled with this miasma of, oh, I've got to do this thing, and it becomes like a job. And fucking oath. Yeah. It needs to be a job. If you're going to market yourself, if you're going to put yourself into the world, if you're going to enter that realm as being a digital creator, you've got to view it as a job. And if you don't like it, don't do it.
Yeah, but I think you can do it in a different way if you're an artist. For example, let's just say you're a designer and you like working with fonts or typography. Right? And your whole thing is just about your screen being recorded and how you change the fonts and size. This is how I change this font. This is my process. This is how I design, right? You could then take the guise of a digital creator, right, and go to the streets and do a story around graffiti in the street. Yeah. And you can say, hey, I'm looking for some inspiration for some new fonts or some new styles. Yeah. And I walk along the street, I look at all the different posters, all the street art, and that inspires me, different textures, different layouts, different forms, different legibility, all that kind of stuff. And that informs my work. And I'll take a few photos, and I go back to my desk, and I look at those photos as I'm designing, right? So that you tie that. So you're being a digital creator, but also tying it back into being an artist versus just going to a restaurant and filming the food and going, I'm eating at this restaurant. So there is a difference between the two, but you can cross over that world. Don't be afraid to do that. I think. I would say.
I think that's really great advice, and that element of creating content for your own story. Yeah. And this is where it gets very challenging for people, especially people who might be timid or that they don't quite, because when the camera is involved, and this is one thing that I always talk about with the camera, it's a form of violence. Even when you've got the camera on yourself, like this is the thing I always teach my film students, is that the word focus means fire, right? And your fire your psychology changes when the lens is on you. Yeah. If you want to do this, you've got to break through that. You've got to figure out a way to actually break through the timidness that you have to go, I don't want to tell my story. Who would want to hear about that? Blah, 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 right? Fuck it off. And just go, right, what's the cleanest way that I can tell my story? Yeah. Telling the story is important for me to do as a digital creator. If I'm starting as a digital creator, doesn't mean I'm any less of an artist. No. It's just that if I want to build that apparatus to publicize my work, I got to tell my own story a little deeper. To give context to it. Yeah. And it deepens and enriches your own process as well. So part of the creative disciplines is process. So if the process is part of your digital creator journey, you're going, okay, like this is something that is a must do. And that is like, okay, show behind the scenes a little bit. Show those kind of elements that are interesting to people if they're interested in your work. A guy, Cam Scott from Bondi, he does these great screen printing culture jamming things.
Oh, yeah, right.
And he did one just recently at Woolworths Metro. And I'll put... and he basically took a screen print and did a little naughty underneath the logo. But he filmed himself doing it.
Yeah.
So he filmed that process, and it's like, okay, yeah, dude did a naughty. But part of his story is showing that him doing it.
Yeah, they're subversive.
That's that his whole brand is that he's doing subversion.
Yeah.
And that's a way. That's why he's popular.
But would you consider him a digital creator, or do you consider him an artist?
I think he's an artist first,
that's what I'm
but
saying.
he uses that as an apparatus to tell his story wider. To go, okay, look, what I'm doing is a form of subversion.
That's right.
I'm seeking to get people like Banksy does, you know.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like Banksy doesn't need to have
because the media does
it for him. So he's been smart. He's like used his art to create its own form of digital content.
Yes, yeah, 100%.
So I think that's a really important thing for people to distinct, is to go, look, if we're going to publicize our work, we've got to know the apparatus.
Yep.
We've got to really take the time. And I think that's the thing where, again, doing the same shit over and over again is really important to do, because when you start to build the protocol, you break through the hard yards of, oh, this is too hard, and then it becomes just something like you do, like a routine, you know? And forming these healthy routines around how you are distributing your content will, first of all, help you with your process, because you're examining your process. So part of the thing is to go, okay, like if I'm telling my own story, I'm thinking about how I'm creating it. Yeah. So then that informs how you create it. So there's an added benefit. There's a level of meditation that happens when you're examining your process to create digital content.
Yeah.
So view it as a plus. I mean, this is where it can be very daunting for people that don't do it well. But it's just like if you suck at vocals, go to a vocal coach.
Yeah.
I listened to my next door neighbor, Maxie. He's a singer. He performs every weekend at parties and restaurants and stuff like that. Every day I hear him going, and it's like
he's putting in the work.
He's just puts work in. You know, you've got to do the work, and it's like that's the thing where I think that's what separates people who are successful and not. Yeah. And you've done this all the time for as long as I've known you. You put the work in. You are tenacious with how you do it, and I think that is the one thing that is necessary, and that's a mental attitude. And I think to be able to flip the switch on going, okay, like what we were saying before, where you've got if you are a creative and you want to be in the world, you have to be a digital creator to some degree. To some degree, yeah, that's right. And I would also say that on that point is a lot of the time you're already doing it. You're just not talking about it. So don't think, shit, now I've got to... I've done this painting and then try and reverse engineer. Why did I do the painting? And, what it should be is you going to the shops buying the paint. Yeah, sure. It should be you first, and that first piece of paint on the canvas. Yeah. That's what people want to see. And then they see the end result and go, holy shit, because I'm with you. I followed that journey with you. But you've already done it. Like, you don't have to create it. It's something that you would have done naturally. Yeah. All you're doing is setting up a tripod with a camera. And I think like one of the challenges there is to actually build out those protocols. The other thing too, and I think this is a MySpace related thing. Chapter 7 of my book, Creative Rituals, is back your shit up. And one of the things that I learned from the MySpace days, when I had a whole bunch of albums and stuff on MySpace of your own making, of my own material, my own music and stuff like that, I had them on a hard drive, and that hard drive died. It's all right. It's on MySpace, right? MySpace doesn't exist anymore, really, in its current form, and it cut all of its things. So I lost all this sort of stuff. One of the things I've always admired about you is that in our friends group, we have this like joke that you have a copy of every image that's ever been taken, and you can access it within 1 second. So you've really taken the time to build out archival of your stuff. And I think like one of the things that creatives struggle with, and especially neurodivergent creatives, especially creatives that have ADHD and these focus attention issues where they want to get on to the next thing. I'm one of these people. I'll put my hand up and say I'm definitely one of these people. I would just want to move on to the next thing. But you've always had that sort of meticulous kind of like approach to that. How have you set up your protocols over the years to sort of save things and kind of keep things in, what's your storage process? It's a boring topic.
No,
but it's so important,
Yeah, it is, because, if Dropbox dies tomorrow, and they go, oh, you have 30 days to delete your 30 days to take all your files forward, you close the entire site down, and it ends up in your spam folder.
Yeah.
And then you log into Dropbox in 6 months' time, you go, holy shit.
Where did it all go?
Yeah.
You lose huge parts of your life.
Parts of your life. And, there's obviously Apple with iCloud and there's Google Drive as well. But it's that, and that's a fairly recent thing, I was saying, in the past decade of just, take a photo, it's back to the cloud. But when you're talking about stuff that you've worked on, it could be like a photograph or a sketch or an idea or an edit that's, it was on a hard drive somewhere or a USB stick, and it's like, where does that all go?
Where does that live?
Where does that all live? I think it's really important because it gives you a reference point of how far you've come.
Yeah,
I think sometimes when you're getting depressed or getting frustrated, you go, this is not working for me today. And then you go back through the archives and you go, oh my God, I've come. I'm kind of embarrassed I actually released that, 6 months or 6 years ago. So I think it really helps with your confidence to be able to say,
I've never really considered that. Like, so the idea being that you go, look, if it's to create a living record of not only what you've done, or not only the physical record, but also a psychological record, so that you can see that, progression.
Yeah.
How have you done that? I mean, like, do you have, like, do you back your stuff up every 6 months? Like, what do you do in terms of that?
I back it all up. I just back it all up to the iCloud, and I've got a few hard drives as well. But yeah, everything I've ever done, like even all the So Bad So Good website designs that I did, all of the app
You've
designs,
kept all that stuff.
And
because you don't know when you're going to need to use
never,
it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, and that's very true. You never know when you're going to use it. But I also think it's very good to reference it when you get stuck. To go, where was I when I was creating that? What was my headspace at? Why was I inspired to do it? How can I get back there? Or I don't want to get back there. I want to recognize that I was there and how far I've come now. And if you have it hosted on a Dropbox or an Imager or Flickr or Tumblr or whatever it is, you're at the mercy of when everyone else pulls a rug out from you. And it's very hard to. It's all these sort of disparate eras where you uploaded there and posted it here and shared it there and saved it in another. It's much better if you bring it all in-house so that you own it all. And I know sometimes it's hard to categorize everything by folders and names and all this. So you could just do a dump, right? You can just go, this is all my work from 2010 to 2015. Just put it on the hard drive. But as technology, you buy a laptop now, there's no USB ports, right? So you've got to have, it's even that itself.
That's the other thing too. It's like, so one of the big dilemmas, and I found this because I've got a whole bunch of like hard drives that I've ripped out of things, and I've tried to like reanimate them because I mean, a lot of my artwork now is like what's called like hauntological art. So it's like recontextualizing the past and stuff, and I've got like so much material that I haven't backed up properly. And part of the reason why I'm doing this chapter in this book is to literally act as a form of therapy for the loss of what's lost, because I haven't backed things up properly. I haven't had the right protocols. And that's the other thing too. The amount of thumb drives that we have in 5 years' time, USB-A might be really hard to find a thing for.
That's right.
Like, we don't think about this sort of stuff, and I think like it's one of these dilemmas. And I think I was reading an article the other day about how there's this gap, and they think that historically there's going to be a big issue in the future with this dilemma, because no one keeps any photographic record, hard physical printout photographs.
Oh, like when you used to go to...
Like literally like when you would get your stuff developed at the chemist. Nobody really does that anymore.
No.
And one of the things that that has been spoken about is that if there's like a massive event, like I'm talking like an EMP,
right,
it wipes out the grid, right? That's it.
Yeah. All those digital cave paintings are gone forever. Yeah,
it's done. So you go, how do you build out a physical process? How do you, it's not going to be economically feasible for everyone. But I think it's that thing of like working out what level of loss are you ready to adjust to.
Oh, yeah.
So you go, like, if you've got all your stuff backed in the cloud and, EMP wipes out the grid, you might have hard drives that will still be usable and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's one of these ones where you go, like, how much do you do? Like, how much work do you do in that? And I think I love that thing where you go, like, being able to sort of view it as a reference point for how far you've come. But I think also the other thing, too, is to be able to remix your own stuff, especially if you're like a musician or you're a video artist or something like that, and you can reanimate what you've done if you've backed it up properly.
No one really knows the context of it. Sometimes you read interviews with bands and they go, "We wrote the song 5 years ago, and we just decided to put it on the new album." And how many releases have you seen from the vaults? Unreleased tracks, rarities and B-sides. That is all archive. There's tracks that maybe weren't good enough for the album, or tracks that you were in a weird headspace when you recorded it, or you didn't like the drummer on that record, but you have this element, and I think it's really important. But I guess in this day and age, if you're editing a video, and let's say the videos are an hour long, and you edit it down to like half an hour, do you keep the other half an hour,
other bits,
or do you go? Oh, I can't be bothered.
So it's like working out the point of like where do you want to leave it to? I mean, it's quite interesting. There's a comedian in Australia called Tony Martin, and he was a part of a very popular radio show called Martin Malloy in the 90s. And before this even existed, back in those days with radio stations, they would never record their own shows. So he would actually bring a tape recorder and tape the show as it was being aired. And then he had an archive of every tape. And then what happened was when they wanted to go on holidays, most jocks didn't actually do this. They were able to cut together a best of reel. And then those reels turned into albums. And they became ARIA award-winning comedy albums. So like his fastidious approach to kind of archiving and building out that system saved his ass, not only in terms of being able to go on holiday without the stress of, losing the show or anything like that, but then he also was able to, produce another body of work from it. And then the National Archive approached him, and now every tape is in the National Archives. So it's like, I think it's one of these processes that people just sort of don't think about. But I think like one of the creative rituals that I really want for my own, trauma processing is that it's really important to think about that. So I think like building out those protocols is it's something you must do.
And it's also just to take stock. And sometimes it's about, obviously it's on a very personal level, but like if you're not feeling inspired that day, that's the day to archive. That's the day to go back and go and see, I forgot about this. I forgot I even worked on this. I forgot I edited that. Or you go, I actually didn't ever finish that. So, if you don't have, like you said before, you mentioned before about how you have to feed this beast, constantly create all the time. Why not just cut to something that you did before? Here's a photograph of me with my first synthesizer. Here's a first photograph of me with my first paintbrush. Here's my first high school painting compared to today. I go, oh my God. And that ties back into that authenticity, that storytelling, the journey, how you've invested in it. If you just disregard it, you're basically like, again, doing yourself a disservice by not showcasing your full journey and your full potential in a lot of ways.
Mate, it's been a fascinating chat, and I think we've probably got another 10 episodes in us. But I think to really hone in on that specific thing today has been really good to do. And I think, it's going to give a lot of food for thought for creatives that might not think about this sort of stuff. And I think like one of the most important things to do is to build out these robust protocols and stick to them. The hardest thing is sticking to this shit. And I think the thing that we need to keep in mind always in the back of our mind, we all fucking hate to do it. If you want to have success in this realm, you've got to have consistency, you've got to have process. But I think the most important thing here is to tell your own story and back yourself, you might not feel that you're interesting or that who the hell would care about this? But it's like, the development of that story is really what will lead you into being able to sell yourself, and it's like, and it's a dirty word for a lot of people to go, I don't want to sell I'm going to compromise my creativity. It's like, okay, that's great, but you're not, if you don't do it properly.
But you also think you never know who's watching. You might only get 5 views, but one of those views could be someone who can actually really change your world. So it's always worth doing it. It's just how much time do you put on to do it? That's the trouble.
Thanks so much, Alex. It's been great to have a chat with you, and I look forward to. I reckon we've got a couple more in us here. There's a lot to break down. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Creative Rituals podcast. For more information, resources, and courses, head over to creativerituals.org.